had started my studies in '97 at the university in a molecular biology program, and after a year, I came here for a summer, and was in an organic lab.
Is that what you saw yourself doing for the rest of your life?
Yeah, it was, because I had already then I had my interest in music. I had been playing in many different bands, and playing my acoustic guitar songs that later became the first album. But I had decent grades. I had some topics that were extra interesting to me. Among them was the smaller molecules and how they interact and create our complex biological machines, and that create consciousness and everything else that's so exciting. And I was really into trying to learn more about the structure and function of these molecules.
It almost sounds spiritual in a sense, right? It's almost using science to get to the bottom of some of these bigger questions of consciousness.
Yeah, to be honest, consciousness wasn't really that big back then. It's become bigger and bigger as a interesting topic for me. But so to be a bit more honest, how I was thinking back then, it was more about these machineries that are underlying everything that are us. So already then I was okay with the thought that we are biological machines, and I saw poetry in that, and it was around that time that biotechnology was really booming, and there were more and more beautiful pictures or drawings of proteins and DNA with these beautiful structures that were intriguing to me.
Generally, when people think of science and the sciences, they tend to think of it as being almost antithetical to the humanities or antithetical to poetry and some of these romantic ideas. But it sounds like you still had a very romantic relationship with molecules and with molecular biology.
Yeah, I was. I have to say, I was drawn to the aesthetic side of biochemistry. Was very excited once they started to show, for example, the ATP synthase, this transmembrane macromolecule that rotated as a and and many other macromolecules that looked like little figures from the cartoons.
When it actually comes time to sit down and study and be a bit more pragmatic about it, is it difficult to translate that kind of that aesthetic appreciation into, I guess, kind of the more, nitty gritty mathematics that you have to do in order to study sciences?
Yeah, so the way I was thinking about it back then was being in awe of the complexity at the same time as I was looking into the smallest details of the DNA replication in herpes viruses, which was very sort of nerdy, and it was all about helicases and how they connect to a certain uh, sequence in the viral DNA. And with the years of doing that research, I released my first album, and then I was able to have a different view on science and in general. Where so actually maybe a couple of years after my first tours, I started revisiting my love of science, and was happy to be this spectator instead of being involved in the details. And that's when I started reading books about science and philosophy and everything in between, and including mathematics. So Max Tegmark, the Swedish mathematician, is one of my favorite people to listen to talking about mathematics. So yeah, there's a with the years, I guess I've matured, and I'm more okay to to inspired by different topics and not only try to be good at one thing.
You mentioned viral transmission, which is obviously something that's unfortunately we've all been thinking a lot about over the past year and a half. Do you get the sense that having studied that, and I guess, continuing in a certain sense to study it over the years, that you have perhaps a unique perspective on the pandemic?
Yeah. So I, as soon as the pandemic was becoming a fact, and then later World Health Organization named it a proper pandemic. I acknowledged that I was definitely not an expert, but I did have the basics so I could read up on what was happening, and so yeah, I felt like a middleman between whoever was an expert and me and my friends. So many of my friends would call me up and ask me questions and ask me what I thought about different types of reactions from different societies. Yeah, so even now I feel like I didn't have that much to say, but I could convey some of the experts that I was reading up on Twitter, like Nicholas Christakis.
Sweden is a place that a lot of people have pointed to around the, I guess, pre-vaccine, the concept of herd immunity. What's your sense of the job that Sweden has done, I guess, in contrast to other countries? I mean, I'm calling you from the U.S., so I'm
Yeah,
certainly
exactly.
I'm certainly not one to speak as far as like doing a good job with the pandemic.
Well, no, no. So yeah, it's super interesting to try to compare the different countries and different regions and see what happened. And I think we'll have a better view in 10 years or 20 years from now. But I think I can point out some things that stand out, and I'm sure the listeners know about Sweden, how we didn't really shut down in the same way as almost all the other countries. We kept the kindergartens open. We The parks were always open for people to walk around. But restaurants, concerts, all of those things didn't shut down, but they switched to groups of eight, then four, then up to 20, then down again, and 50 at one point last summer, and then down again. So there was Folkhälsomyndigheten, which is the group of people that are in charge of giving directions in Sweden. They're not only concerned about the viral pandemic, but also about health in general. So I think that gave Sweden a unique way of tackling the pandemic. And their issue was to always follow the science. Um, but but yeah, so masks. We didn't need to wear masks. People were allowed to, of course, if they wanted to. And it wasn't until when the society was opening up again that it was demanded for people to use on public transport. So it was. I remember reacting back in March 2020 that I was reading Twitter, reading on how to deal with like really scary pandemics, and in terms of getting food and being able to be off grid for a month. And then Sweden was like, oh, just yeah, just be careful, don't be too close to other people. If you feel the least sick, stay at home, and that was it. And I was like, oh, okay, shit, we have to think for ourselves. When I compared to other countries that really shut down, and for example, my dad lives in Argentina, and they were told to stay at home, and he loves to read and watch documentaries, so he was in a way happy. But yeah, it was really hard as people stayed at home for such a long time over there. So Sweden, yeah, it really stands out. I think they acknowledged that they did some things that were wrong, or yeah, mistakes basically, and it was letting the virus into the elderly homes. It killed a lot of people, and then also among the lower social economic groups. There was a lot of Somalis, people from Iraq that were overrepresented in the deaths. So yeah, and that was acknowledged pretty early. So there wasn't that much of a, what do you say, a proudness of the way we did things. They were really trying to be on top of it. And
I think one of the ways in which this has been unprecedented for a lot of us in a lot of our lifetimes is that since it is an unknown, we're not really used to a piece of science that's so in our face 24/7 that is constantly changing, or that our understanding of it is constantly changing in real time. And that's one of the things I think that's been difficult for people to adjust to. Here early on, we were told that not to wear masks, that masks were worthless. And then the guidance on that changed. And I don't think that people are used to adjusting.
Yeah. My sense was that since China was manufacturing these masks, it was sort of like a pragmatic step to tell people to, yeah, don't buy the masks. They're not really working that well. It's better to be 2 meters away from each other. But then, of course, more and more countries were manufacturing masks, and then the whole world started using them. And yeah, I see it as a sad part of the world not being prepared and not being able to collaborate better. There were situations in Europe that were pretty sad about trucks coming with what do you call it, PPE equipment, and being stopped in one country instead of letting them pass to the next country. So yeah, a lot of egoism going on.
Egoism in politics, certainly, as you said, China being a part of this, politics were a big part of our reaction here, which, unfortunately, certainly in the States and I think just globally at this point, I think politics is so polarized now that it's almost impossible to imagine navigating a big global problem like this without politics being front and center.
Yeah. No, it's it's tragic, and at the same time, I can't help but feeling there's some. I don't really need to watch reality series or fiction. The reality is so interesting as it is, and I was thinking about the sort of comparing U.S. and Sweden, and in how we in Sweden we also have problems with the anti-vax movement, and we have our sort of health gurus that are very certain about their how they look and on vaccines and on the pandemic. Yeah, it's just mind-boggling many times, and it is very polarized. So not it's not only a U.S. thing, even though it's a bigger issue over there.
I know you're somebody who, like a lot of us, has a lot of concerns about climate change. It's something that you talk about quite a bit, and I know it's something that you discuss a bit on social media. I was thinking
Mm.
about the global response to the pandemic, the global response to an issue that is just so present and in front of our faces, and how it probably doesn't bode well for perhaps our ability to address something as huge, but in a lot of ways abstract as climate change.
Yeah, I think my so I have optimism within me. I think the pandemic showed that people have to, be able to follow guidance, and they have to be able to adapt to new information, and many times they have to think for themselves. Like, should I meet that person? Is that one someone who met other people? Am I actually feeling a fever, or is this okay? And I think global warming is slightly different. I think if we rely on everyone to change their way of living, then I think we're doomed. But if we continue doing innovations in green technology, then we probably will get to a point where we'll be thinking about other things while being green. And so I, on Twitter, where I'm vocal about these topics. I have the three hashtags: secular humanism, as like topics that I'm interested in: secular humanism, effective altruism, and eco-modernism. And I think eco-modernism has a great framework for thinking about the issue of global warming, and all environmental issues, that where so eco-modernists are aware that we're creating problems, but if we can, for example, live in denser cities, we might have a lower impact. So technologies that use less land are good. yeah, and there's a list of things that I sort of I feel calm when I read people that look at the climate crisis as an engineering problem, both the technological and social.
What is effective altruism? Just sort of, is that relying on people to do things for the betterment of society?
Yeah, so it's the way to talk about effective altruism is asking the question: how can I do the most good with the resources I have, with time or money, and maybe as a student, which career should I pursue to tackle one of the many areas where we can affect the human flourishing. So yeah, it's a movement that sort of started around Oxford with young students and researchers, but it was based on thoughts and articles and I think a book also by Peter Singer, the philosopher. And Peter Singer himself has been very involved in global health and basically starting up this the Life You Can Save website where you can look at the most effective charities. So basically, if you want to do a lot of good with some money, you can you can shop around and see which charities are doing having the biggest bang for the buck in terms of for each dollar spent, see how many quality life years you're adding to someone's life. But I could talk even more and mention that it's there are many ways to think about effective altruism. So if you think about future generations or even current generations, then issues like pandemic or artificial AI become very important too. So within those circles, I was listening to many things online about pandemics before the pandemic hit, which was one of the inspirations to write the song Visions on the album.
I like the way you put it, to paraphrase you, doing the most you can with the resources that you have. Now, obviously, you understand that you have this social media platform, and visiting your Twitter page, for example, in spite of the fact that you've got this new music coming out and that you're going on tour, you're largely using it as a platform to discuss, again, things like climate change and what's going on in Afghanistan right now. Beyond that, though, when you talk about doing what you can with the resources you have, and I guess to extend that to the platform that you have, what's your sense of how, if at all, you can use your music as a way to express this sentiment?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted question in a way because on one hand, the way I think about my artistry is I make music, and some people find it relaxing and soothing, and then I feel my job is done. It's if I help someone lower their heartbeat and be able to sleep better, I'm super happy. If they sleep on my show, that's also fun, but maybe less fun. It's happened too many times, but yeah. So that's maybe one part, the aesthetic side, the comforting side of some of the songs that might help people through difficult periods, maybe relationship problems or death in the family, or just wanting to have calm music while they study. Um, and so that would be the sounds, and then apart from the sounds, I've been experimenting with what I'm conveying with the words in the lyrics, and that's a sort of like a parallel project that I've had since my second album back in 2007, when I try to look up from my internal feelings, my inner demons, and my relationship problems, and try to find other topics. And that's when I thought it was fun to poke a bit on religion, on worldviews that are clashing. So I mentioned how I was inspired by Richard Dawkins, for example, and that part of me has escalated, and so if if I try to answer your question about effective altruism and my music, there's an ambition, at least for me from my side, that I'm writing songs that change the world for the better, but it's not as well researched as giving $1,000 to Against Malaria Foundation. So that would need a very, I think that would be a fun project to try to figure out how information travels through our brains and get processed in our brains, and how there's just like viruses, is there information that's has a positive impact, a neutral or a negative, like in not only a 3-point scale but maybe a 100-point scale, uh, and that's probably an area that you will never get perfect answers, but maybe that could be a fun thing to try to answer, and then maybe you can see the effect of I don't know, white supremacist oi punk compared to one of my songs, and see which one has better effect on the well-being of humans.
I know that you, at least to some degree, come from a hardcore background, so you made that musically. You made quite a sonic transition yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah. So switching topics in a way, like I started playing bass in a punk band. It was basically a summer when I was 13, turning 14, that me and my friends, all of us got into music, and yeah, it was Misfits, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys on one hand, and on the other, I was learning my acoustic guitar, playing Beatles, Bossa Nova, Silvio Rodriguez, and then later started to learn classical guitar. But yeah, I had this punk and hardcore side for many years, and then I got invited to a couple of other bands that were more into emo rock or indie rock.
Do you get a sense of what that did for your own psychology, or your own, I guess, mood?
Yeah, I think it was good good in many ways to be in bands, hanging out with my friends, getting some sort of ventilation of frustrated emotions, and but I'm not sure if I'm trying to think about this idea of trying to see if things are positive or negative or neutral. I think I could have exchanged the hardcore music with skating and just hanging out and skating. So it's yeah, I think there were many positive sides to that.
Particularly when you're a teenager or adolescent or young adult, there is a certain amount of just energy, I think, that you
Yeah,
need an outlet for, that you need to burn off.
yeah. It's I mean, in my case, it was good to have interests because yeah, I also had friends that I mean, one of the things they did was to steal cars and and do graffiti where they shouldn't or couldn't. So yeah, and there is this period in life where depending on where you live, it's easy to fall into sort of bad habits with drugs too. Like I had many friends that, I mean, I was drinking. I tried the gas that you use in lighters once or
Oh yeah,
twice. That was
huffing
huffing.
propane. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that once or twice, but I had some friends that got stuck with it, and that wasn't good for their brains. So yeah, no, just trying to mention how having hobbies and interests, and then just having friends that lead you towards good things instead of bad things. That might be more important than the actual things that you're doing.
What's your sense of the role that, for you personally, that music has played in dealing with the events of the past year and a half?
So this past year and a half, it's been mostly about hanging out with my daughter. I mean, she was able to go to kindergarten, but whenever she was slightly sick, she was with me, and so yeah, there wasn't that much time for music. We went to dance classes for a while, and for me, music was having a couple of playlists to put me in good mood or sleepy mood or happy mood or running mood. So I didn't discover that many new songs, but I had I used my playlists for different functions. And of course, I was finishing up my album. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I had 2 or 3 songs that I have good versions, but I suddenly had lots of time to polish them. So I spent that was actually a bonus in a way, because usually there's a deadline and then the album has to come out.
It really varies from artist to artist, but I find that a lot of people, musicians, writers, really value deadlines, really value having this sort of force externality that's making them get something out in time. That's making them finish something that they might otherwise work on forever.
Yeah. I mean, I had problems with procrastination for forever, and yeah, deadlines are good, and realistic deadlines are even better.
You were able to take extra time on this, and you feel like the the amount of time that it afforded you ultimately made the songs better.
Yeah. So there was Swing, which is the newest release. I had a version of that song in Swedish that wasn't as good, I feel. Um, Visions, I had a couple of different versions, and I was able to polish that song a bit more. And then Shumme, the Swedish song, was also had versions that weren't as good, I feel. So yeah, the a couple of months within the pandemic made a better album, I feel.
How have you traditionally approached language and approached the decision of what language to write and sing a song in?
Yeah, it's been since I was a teenager. Even though I had the influence of Silvio Rodriguez and Mercedes Sosa and Latin American artists, I almost immediately started writing in English, and that was probably just because my friends were doing it. It was sort of what you did. I didn't reflect too much on it. Just that whenever I thought about writing in Swedish, it was like corny or silly or too direct. And Spanish, in a way, felt similar. There was not so with English there was this sense of mystery or enigma, which was good. But then, of course, with the decades, I felt more and more that maybe I should try to write in Swedish or Spanish. And with the last album, I had demos that had a couple of sentences each, but I got stuck, and then I switched to English to see if that would better, and it did. So maybe partly because I was lazy, I didn't write then. But now when I tried it, it just worked, and I'm happy for it. I feel like showing more of my true colors. I'm showing different styles within the same album, both heavy and moody, and but also very light. And then also with the lyrics, I'm using both my mother tongues plus English, and so yeah, I feel more comfortable with this actually.
I think, and you can correct me if this is not at all a good analogy, as somebody who both is bad at other languages and really is also very bad at playing music myself. But the closest analogy I can think of in terms of writing something in one language versus another is composing a song on a different instrument. Is composing something on piano versus composing on something on guitar. Do you feel that the language that you choose to write in has as profound an impact on the final product?
I think it has an impact, but more in terms of so if you're walking in a forest and you don't really have a specific direction where to go, you just start walking and you let's take this way or that way, and then all of a sudden you end up by a lake or by a mountain, or it's same with the lyrics, because usually I start with the music and a melody, and then I start putting words, and so maybe it's like depending on which words I start using, then I'm trying to find words that rhyme, and then all of a sudden there starts to be a meaning, and I need to add stuff that fits together with the first stuff, and that leads me to a certain point. So it's not that I set out to write about a certain topic and then I choose the words. It's more I see where they lead me. So in that sense, because of the words that rhyme in different languages, I might end up in different places.
It's the rhyme scheme, but also languages tend to have different meters.
Yeah,
I assume that has a big impact on the way it's sung as well.
yeah. And that probably comes from a intuitive side. I haven't thought about it too much, and that's so. Yeah, it would be fun to hear a linguist talk about this.
I had read too, I think in one of the interviews that you did around this, that your daughter learning to speak Spanish was if not a big part, at least sort of played a role in the decision to write some of these in Spanish.
Yeah. I mean, it was partly me talking to her in Spanish. So even though I speak Spanish with my family, we don't talk that often. So talking to her every day, I think made something with the Spanish side of my brain um, loosened up a bit. And but then I think more about becoming a dad and thinking about who I want to be as a person and also as an artist. I felt like it was kind of silly to only sing in English. I had internal pressure to to be a bit more varied.
I don't know if you are familiar at all, or I assume you are, just based on this conversation with you and you talking about being interested in things like consciousness. But in Zen Buddhism, there's this idea of beginner's mind. That's the first thing I thought about when you were discussing this idea of your young daughter learning this language, in that I think it perhaps gives you a perspective of on this language that you've been speaking your entire life.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's uh, this. Yeah, exactly. And not only language, but basically everything. You start to see everything you do, everything around you with fresh eyes. So that I think that also affected the type of topics I chose for the different songs.
Has that impacted the music itself as well?
Oh yeah. So the playfulness, I'm sure it would have. I think I would have done a different album if it wasn't for my daughter and just being around her and playing and humming and uh, and being silly.
A line that you have to walk as an artist and as somebody who is thoughtful about society and is concerned with some of these larger topics and does want to address them to a certain degree in your music is there's a line that you have to walk between being socially conscious and also being mindful of the fact that a lot of people use music as escapism. Is that a hard line to walk?
Yeah, I think it is if you want both at the same time. And so in many ways, I'm okay with people that don't like the music and switch it off and switch to another artist because it is. I think it is hard to combine both aims within a same song or same album without losing some of your audience.
You mentioned this idea of playfulness, and I think that
Yeah.
that is a way of pulling people back in.
Oh yeah, so I can talk about how I mean, I like thinking about memes and meme complexes. So I see an album as a collection of memes, and yeah, I have some honey, I have some salt, I have some some bitterness, and so yeah, a song like Swing will probably lead me to a bigger audience than usual. At the same time, I'm having songs that might rub people the wrong way, and so yeah, it's always been fun to try to not only do music that sounds good or makes has good grooves, but also is interesting art in a way. And whenever I go to a art gallery or modern arts museum, for me the most interesting art is where you have this tension between stuff you like and stuff that rubs you the wrong way for some reason, and then almost like humor can be there can be a tension and release, and hopefully a debugging of your system.